It was a quiet afternoon in a peaceful neighborhood, the kind of place where everyone knows each other and trouble rarely stirs. That calm was shattered when a group of riders roared down the street, their engines echoing off the houses. At first, it seemed like just another group out for a thrill, but their behavior quickly turned disruptive. Revving engines, reckless stunts, and loud taunts broke the neighborhood's stillness. What they didn't realize was that one of the residents, a retired Air Force veteran, was watching from his porch. Known for his calm demeanor and sharp instincts, he wasn't the type to let chaos take over without stepping in. As the riders pushed their antics too far, they unknowingly crossed a line they'd regret. What happened next wasn't just a lesson in respect. It was a showdown no one saw coming. Stay tuned to see how this unforgettable encounter unfolded. The veteran, Mr. Carter, had seen plenty during his years in the service. Situations that required patience, precision, and an unshakable calm. He wasn't one to act rashly, but the riders were pushing their luck. From his porch, he watched as they tore through the neighborhood, their loud jeers and reckless moves unnerving families and scattering kids who had been playing outside. To the riders, it was all a joke, another adrenaline-fueled stop on their day of chaos. They laughed as they weaved between parked cars and popped wheelies, unaware that Mr. Carter had started to move. Inside his house, a wall of framed medals and faded photographs hinted at a life of discipline and courage, a life they couldn't begin to understand. As he stepped outside, the riders' laughter carried through the air. What they didn't know was that they were about to meet someone who didn't scare easily. Mr. Carter calmly walked toward the edge of his yard, his sharp eyes fixed on the group of riders. The leader of the pack, a cocky young man on a roaring black bike, noticed him first. With a smirk, he revved his engine louder, clearly enjoying the disruption they were causing. The other riders followed suit, their noise creating a chaotic symphony that echoed through the neighborhood. But Mr. Carter didn't flinch. He simply stood there, his presence commanding in its quiet intensity. His neighbors peeked out from their windows, torn between fear and curiosity. A few whispered to each other, wondering what he was planning. The riders, emboldened by the attention, decided to escalate their antics. They circled back toward Mr. Carter's driveway, kicking up gravel as they performed a reckless stunt just feet away from where he stood. Still, he didn't move, except for a slight smile that hinted he was ready for whatever came next. The riders circled tighter, their engines roaring like predators toying with prey. One of them, emboldened by the crowd they'd drawn, shouted, "What's the matter, old man?" Scared. Laughter erupted, but Mr. Carter remained unshaken. His calm demeanor seemed to rattle them more than any outburst could have. Then, with a sudden shift, Mr. Carter raised his hand, a firm but simple gesture that somehow cut through the noise. The laughter faltered, replaced by murmurs of confusion. "This is where it stops," he said, his voice steady but carrying an unmistakable authority. The leader scoffed and revved his engine again, inching closer in a blatant show of defiance. The tension was electric, the air thick with the unspoken challenge between a disciplined veteran and a group of thrill-seekers. Nearby neighbors held their breath, wondering if Mr. Carter's years of experience would be enough to face this dangerous situation head-on. Just as the leader of the riders inched closer, a low growl pierced through the tension, not from a person, but from a well-trained German shepherd stepping out of the house. The dog's posture was alert, its sharp eyes locked onto the group. Mr. Carter didn't look down or give a command. It was as though the dog already understood what to do. The riders exchanged uneasy glances, their bravado flickering for a moment. "What, you need backup now?" One of them jeered, but there was a crack in his voice. Mr. Carter, unbothered, stood his ground. "You've made your mess," he said evenly. "Now you clean it up, or you'll regret it. Before they could react, another twist caught them off guard. Flashing red and blue lights appeared at the end of the street. The sound of approaching sirens filled the air. The riders panicked, but the leader hesitated, caught between defiance and retreat. The neighborhood, once silent, had turned into a pressure cooker on the verge of exploding. As the sirens grew louder, the riders' bravado crumbled. One by one, they looked to their leader for direction, but his confidence had evaporated. He tried to act unfazed, yelling, "Let's go." But before they could flee, Mr. Carter took a step forward, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Running won't fix this. Stay, face it like men, or you'll be running forever." The leader hesitated, his grip tightening on the handlebars. He glanced back at his crew, realizing their fear was now aimed at him. Reluctantly, he killed the engine, motioning for the others to do the same. The sudden silence was deafening. As the police cars pulled up, officers stepped out, ready for confrontation. But they stopped short, surprised to find Mr. Carter calmly explaining the situation. The riders were frozen, too stunned to protest. Then came the twist. As the officers cuffed the leader, one turned to Mr. Carter and said, "You didn't tell them, did you?" Confused, the riders watched as Mr. Carter chuckled. "No need," he replied. "Sometimes actions speak louder than resumes." It turned out the quiet veteran wasn't just retired. He had trained military K-9 units and worked in law enforcement. The riders had underestimated not just a man, but a lifetime of discipline, strategy, and strength. As they were led away, their stunned faces said it all. The neighborhood, once disrupted, returned to peace, and Mr. Carter, with his loyal dog at his side, stepped back into his home, the quiet hero no one would soon forget. As the police cars drove off, taking the riders with them, the neighborhood seemed to exhale a collective sigh of relief. Children slowly returned to their front yards, and neighbors came out from their homes to thank Mr. Carter. He accepted their gratitude with a modest nod, brushing it off as no big deal. His dog, still by his side, wagged its tail as if sensing the calm had returned. One of the neighbors, a young boy who often admired the veteran from afar, asked, "Were you scared?" Mr. Carter smiled and replied, "Not scared, just prepared." The neighborhood returned to its quiet rhythm, but the events of the day left a lasting impact. The riders learned a tough lesson about respect and accountability, while the community was reminded of the strength and wisdom in its quietest member. Mr. Carter sat back on his porch, the sun setting behind him, as peace once again settled over the neighborhood.